One of the really exciting concepts that is abroad in the world at the moment is the notion of Africa rising. And there's a huge sense in which this is the time of the African continent. As Common Purpose, obviously, we are very interested in what the leadership challenges for the African continent are at this point in time. And so we're starting to hear about that from many quarters. One of the things that I see most clearly at this point in time is, although folk identify Africa as a continent of 1 billion people, which makes it very attractive, China 1.6 billion, China is a single country and Africa is 54 different countries. And so there's an enormous fragmentation on the continent. Not only on a country-by-country basis, but regionally as well. There's West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, Central Africa, North Africa, with quite distinctly different characteristics, and in many cases, a language complexity as well. There are over 2,000 indigenous African languages, but then we have the challenge of the Anglophone component of Africa, the Francophone component of Africa, the Portuguese-speaking Africans, the Arabic-speaking Africans, and so we all know how fundamentally important language is to us in terms of cohesion. So there are many factors that contribute to this fragmentation of the continent, and I think until African leaders really begin to get their hands around how to bring a greater level of convergence together for the economic benefit of the continent with a number of different spin-offs, that's a huge piece. Another of the significant, and these are in no particular order because there are so many significant challenges, I think, for the continent. We know that the continent is poorly equipped from an infrastructure perspective, and I was reading recently about a piece of road that was installed, that was constructed by a development company, and it was 30 kilometers of road, and the claim was being made at the launch event that this brought the travel time down from 3 weeks to 2 hours to travel those 30 kilometers. Now, most of us don't have any concept of what a country is like when it is roadless, when its infrastructure doesn't allow simple mobility from one destination to another 30 kilometers away without an enormous challenge. And so equipping the continent with better infrastructure, you can see, is just fundamentally important. Now, leaders can allow all sorts of challenges to get in the way of that, or leaders can really enable through that. Education is clearly another key challenge on the continent, with a hugely young population. And as we have seen in the South African context, the ability of leaders to enable through education, or the ability of leaders to disempower through failure to produce good quality education is critical. And the educational culture that leaders are able to create in the country, I think through my own exposure to Zimbabwe and South Africa, countries which have in the last decade had very, very different economic success. South Africa has forged ahead, albeit slowly, but nevertheless consistently, and Zimbabwe suffered enormous economic ruin, almost, as we know. But the education system of Zimbabwe has managed to survive, and I think that's because over the years leaders have created a culture of valuing education in that country. In our own country, with all its resources, we know that our education outcomes are very poor. So those are some of the kinds of challenges that I think the leaders of South Africa, of the African continent, need to get to grips with as we move ahead.